Welcome to You Can Trust Yourself with Meg and Maggie. Nothing feels as good as listening to your own voice, and each week we have conversations to help you do just that. Get comfy, grab your favorite fun drink, and let's dive into this week's episode. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Trust Pod. Oh, I just love saying that. It's so fun. It is December, the second episode of December, which means that this one is coming out right after Thanksgiving. And so this week we are going to have a little real talk, wellness check, see how we're really doing, talk about our fun drinks, talk about some social media trends that we are seeing right now, and just kind of check in and think a little bit about the future and the expectations that we want to set moving into the next set of holidays that we have here. So we're going to be a little bit all over the place, but it will all fit together seamlessly, I promise. And Meg, hi, welcome to the recording. It is so nice to have you here. I love you so much. Let's just jump right in and start. Please tell me about your fun drink of the day.
Well, I have 2 fun drinks at all times. Sometimes there's 3. We're fun drink girlies, as you know. That's why we put it in our intro there. Non-alcoholic. Yeah, we always have to clarify that we really don't even drink alcohol. I have water with lemon in my big ol' jug here. And then I was feeling a cozy drink today, so I actually went with some hot coffee in my cute little Santa mug. If you're watching on YouTube, it is a pink Santa mug. It was $3 at Target in that little first section when you come in. And it's just really precious. I've been having cocoa in it and I'm really enjoying it. So fun drinks are pretty simple today, water and coffee, but those are honestly some of my favorites. What are you drinking today, Maggie? What is the fun drink of choice?
First of all, that Santa mug is so cute. Second
It's
of all,
really cute.
I also have water also in my hydro jug that you fully influenced me to get.
Yes.
And secondly, I have hot cinnamon spice tea in my dog mom mug.
I love it.
We love the dog mom mug. Big on all things dog mom around here. But hot cinnamon spice, Harney and Sons black tea is my most favorite tea on the planet.
Really?
Yes.
I love it. Sometimes the spice throws me off. Cinnamon, you had me at cinnamon and hot tea. I love some tea, but something about spice tea, I've tried the spice chais. The spice throws me off, but love the warm vibes. I know it's snowing up there in New York. It's chilly down here. I'm in Northern Virginia, and so we're just having some cold weather chit chat with you all, and it's the perfect day to discuss, like Maggie was talking about, wellness check, checking in on each other, checking in on all of you. We're talking some about, first we're going to start with just post-Thanksgiving, right? So if you're listening to this in real time, Thanksgiving would be about 2 weeks ago now. And so we're just checking in. There can be a lot that comes up during that time. So Maggie, wellness update, check in with us. I know we were joking before we hit record of whenever somebody says how are you? You're like, well, now or overall, or do you want the real story or just the socially appropriate good answer, right? When we all just say good, how are you? So as much or as not as much as you want to tell us, give us a little update on where you are post Thanksgiving.
That is the most real thing ever. This is how this conversation came about, because we were, like you were just saying before we hit record, we were talking about just, how Thanksgiving went, how we're doing, all of this stuff. And there are so many different ways you can answer that question, right? You're like, oh, how are you? What's new? And it's like, well, do you want me to tell you about what's going through my mind at this second, or what has happened today, yesterday, the last 6 months, the whole year since the last time I saw you? Where do we want to go,
Right.
So I feel like for me at this moment, I actually had a little Thanksgiving hangover. Again, not from alcohol. But I was not expecting to feel so many things when I was asked those questions. So I haven't shared a ton of this on the podcast yet, but I had a really challenging year. I ended up with like a lot of career and work changes, voluntary. Like I chose to change them, but that still created kind of like a big identity crisis,
Mm.
honestly. So that was one part of it. Two of my dogs got cancer like separately this summer and both passed away within the same week. I pulled my hamstring in June and have been recovering from that since. We've had my husband and I own a bunch of businesses, and business is just hard at times, right? That's challenging. And so it's been one of the more challenging years in terms of like thing after thing after thing. And at this point in my day to day, I'm feeling pretty good. And so I wasn't expecting to feel so many emotions when people were
Mm.
asking me those questions. Like
Mhm.
I wasn't prepared. Honestly, I didn't think that I I thought I was kind of through it and would be able to talk about things from where I'm at now, but that was not the case at all.
Mm.
And it was pretty challenging for me to navigate those emotions because I don't know, like in a big family setting, I don't really want to tell you all the details right this
Mm.
moment. Like we can talk about it one on one, but right now I don't really want to cry. I
Yeah.
just don't. So I'm like I don't know how to like navigate this in a way that where I'm being honest, because I don't like saying, like you just said, the socially acceptable answer, like, how are you? I'm good. It's like, well, I'm not really good. And so I don't want to
Right.
tell you that I'm good, but I also don't want to dump everything on you that
Mhm.
has been going on. And so it's like finding that balance is really challenging.
Right.
And so, yeah, this week I feel like I've been just kind of recovering from that and working through all of those things and just kind of realizing that, okay, yeah, we are working through this and our day to day is getting better and it's all still there and that's okay. And, we kind of just have to go through it again. And that happens. We don't really fully get over things once and we're done. That's just not
Yeah.
really how it works. And so
Right.
that's kind of where I'm at.
Mhm. And
Yep.
thank you for sharing that with us because I think so many of us feel that, and that's such a real concept of the how are you and the socially acceptable answers and how much we want to give. And it's one of those things that you're right. It's such a fine line between like I want to be open. I want to tell people how I'm really doing, and how do I share something honestly while also knowing that it's going to bring out a vulnerability in me and we're just talking in passing quick. And there's so many nuances to that. So I don't have the answers for that. I just have the validation of that's a very real experience that so many of us feel. I always think about it like when I'm in like therapy mag mode, right? Like when I'm doing therapy and I'm um there to serve my clients, when I ask them how they are, their answer is so different. Even if they are in it, therapy's not always like, the dark emotions and the hard emotions and sometimes it is joy and sometimes it is happy things they're sharing, but there's always just it removes the social norms from it when you're in a therapeutic setting. So when your therapist says to you, "How are you?" you're not thinking of giving the socially appropriate answer usually because you know that your therapist is there who's saying, no, how are you really?
Mhm.
Right. And so I think about that a lot of times, like when we go, I say, like when I go into like the real world and, just a different setting of wanting to know how much to keep close to your chest. And also, like, just that dance is a really real thing. So thank you for sharing that with us. And I'm also feeling just to give myself the check-in because I know that's what you would ask me next is my post Thanksgiving check-in. Really quick for me, I am usually, as I said on last week's episode, queen of cozy, holiday queen, like all my favorite things. And this year I'm really feeling a little more like winter blues, if you will. That's what I'm calling it, of like just noticing like some changes happening in my life, some areas that I have shifted, and noticing that I really need to focus on one day at a time right now. I was telling Maggie this before we hit record. Like, I was having all the emotions and really crying and talking to my husband and all the things. And I said to him, it was like such an epiphany of like, I just want to go one day at a time. And I said it like pleading, as if somebody was telling me to do more than one day at a time. I said it to him in a way of like, could I just do that? Like, is that an option? And so if any of you, maybe run a little more like I do, where you're just always trying to push for more and striving for quote unquote a bigger life or whatever, personal development, blah, blah, blah. Sometimes there is something so freaking amazing about going one day at a time. I'm on
Yes.
day one, everybody, so we'll check in soon. But I am so far, I'm looking at my list and I'm like, doing my usual thing where I'm like, oh, well, I can get this done because I have a second here and then I can do that. And it's like, no wonder why you're overwhelmed and burnt out and wanting to just like lay down and not do anything and losing your motivation because you're doing too much at once. So I say all that to say that if any of you are in that winter blues state where you're trying to kind of be like, okay, what do I actually want to bring into the new year, which we'll talk about here in this episode with the trendy word winter arc. I'm there too, and I'm going through that now. And do not forget to take your vitamin D. Talk to your doctor, I guess, but I don't think any doctor is like, no, stop the vitamin D. I think we all need vitamin D.
Yes.
It's
I
like,
think so when you're talking about going one day at a time, I really relate to that because I do that a lot actually. And I notice okay, so as I was just saying before, like this year has been pretty challenging in comparison to some others. And so I feel like I've been in this what go one day at a time season for months now. And that happens sometimes, right? Like there's nothing wrong with that. It's okay that right now we're just going one day at a time. And like you were telling me before, you're making a list for each day of the things that you need to do that day. And that's it. We're not focusing on the big picture as much. Of course, it's in the back of their mind, we're not ignoring it completely. But I do that a lot and it really helps me. It really, really does, especially in those times where, you're feeling a little bit down or your motivation is not there and, you need that just a little extra push to just go from one thing to the next, right? Because we can't just give up on it all. That's not how life works, and of course there's going to be days where you have to do that, but in the big picture, we have to keep moving forward while we navigate the emotions or the feelings or, whatever else is going on. And so I do that too, and it really, really helps me.
it's interesting because when we started out this podcast for our OG listeners, trustees now, if you will, we started out the podcast as, first of all, the Meg Maggi podcast. Shout out to our original name. And it was all about navigating going from like the all or nothing mindset into a more like intuitive way of living, right? So for those of you who know the all or nothing mindset, you may be somebody who naturally runs that way because that tends to be, we can just identify ourselves as people who are kind of like all in and all out, right? And I'm somebody who naturally runs like that. And we could get more into the psych, but for another day and what that could mean and blah, blah, blah. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. It just means that we typically tend to run where we're like full gas, to the floor. Or like, if you're like me, I'm like, where's the emergency brake? Like it's one of the two. It's either like I'm in full crazy energy, getting it all done, doing the things. And then I'm like literally like pulling for the emergency brake. Like, please make this train stop because I can't keep up with it anymore. And that is, so again, shout out to the original podcast. We would talk about this all the time of like, it's not a sustainable way of living. And it's one of those that comes with a lot of highs and lows. And in some ways it can feel like a roller coaster. And my poor sweet husband, you learn a lot about yourself when you enter into a marriage and you try and live your life with somebody else. And he'll be like, sometimes I feel like we're on a roller coaster. And I'm like, yeah, I think that's my mindset slipping in onto you. Because as I've mentioned before, it's interesting when we look at other people and how they live life to be like, wait a second, he goes one day at a time. He's so present. Right. And there's actually something to be said about, kind of blending those worlds together of like looking to the future and moving towards something and being super present. But I say all this to say like that all or nothing mentality, if you're somebody like that, it can feel so overwhelming to just begin. Like when I'm really in a season where I'm struggling, like I mean struggling to just do the daily things of living, right? When I try and like overhaul my whole life, I find myself doing that. I'm like, okay, well then I've got to like clean up my diet and go work out more, and I've got to like redo my house, and I've got to, do this, and the third. And it's like, that's me slipping back into the all or the nothing. It's like when my life goes so much towards the down energy, sad mode, I like go in like overhaul mode, like an excavator who's going in and is like, well, let's rip it all out and go again. And it's like, no, I really just need to like go one thing at a time. So if you're also feeling that, again, day one here, people. So this is not like some concrete evidence, we'll circle back. But I'm practicing this way. I've been working towards this lifestyle for a long time, but the one day at a time is a season for it right now, and I'm really in it and trying to do that. So thank you, Maggie, for also saying that you've had to do that, because it just feels good to know that sometimes, or maybe all the time, that's what we need.
Absolutely. And it just is what it is sometimes. There's nothing wrong with going one day at a time or being in a season where you can plan out the rest of your whole life and have a 50-year vision. Like, we have room for all of it. And so, yeah, we just wanted to honestly check in and just say, like you just said, Meg, if you're feeling that way too, you are not alone. We are here with you, and we're going to keep going, right? You and I just planned our 12 days of Christmas content schedule, which, if you're listening to this on the day that it comes out, it is day one of the 12 days of Christmas. So be sure to check out what's going on social media, because you'll get a sneak peek into our lives from each of our perspectives on 12 different topics, which is very, very exciting. And we're making room for all of it, right? We're feeling like, okay, maybe planning everything ahead is overwhelming, and we have to plan some things so that way we can keep our visions going, right? It has to be a little bit of everything. So that's the check-in. The next thing that we wanted to talk about, which I would love for you to take the lead on, Meg, because you are the one that brought this to the table, is this idea of a winter arc. So this is a new term that you just brought it up today. I have been seeing it on social media, but truthfully, I did not take the time before this to like figure out what it actually was. And I feel like that happens a lot with things that we see on social media, at least for me. I'm like, I don't know what this means. And then usually I ask my sister and she knows and tells me. But the winter arc. So tell us what that is, and then let's have a little conversation about it.
Yeah, so I didn't know what it was either, and I kept seeing it, and I was like, I don't know, it just sounds pretty. Like the words winter arc just sounds really nice together, so I got curious and I mentioned it to Maggie. And according to Google, so I typed in winter arc meeting, and the AI overview says the winter arc is a personal development trend that involves setting intentions and focusing on health and wellness during the months of October to January. So basically, the idea of it, from what I'm seeing, is for people to kind of like set the intentionality of what am I liking? What am I trying to bring into the next year? It's like a very, almost like an art of like reflection and wondering what are we trying to incorporate for the new year? Because we've talked about this before. I'm really shouting out the old seasons a lot. We talked about this a ton with around the content we would put out around the new year of like, life doesn't just begin and end in the new year. That's like everything we're trying to do that's good for us. It begins and ends in January, right? And that concept does not move us towards our vision. Like Maggie said, like sometimes we're crawling towards our vision, just doing it one day at a time, whatever it may be. And when we have that mindset of like, trying to do something at the first of the month, that's what I'm basically seeing what the winter arc is it's this time of reflection and wondering and planning of what do I want to bring with me into the new year? What do I want to add in? What do I want to maybe leave behind? So Maggie, now that we know a very, very basic amount of what the winter arc is, let's put you on the spot with
Bring
this
it.
new concept that is new to you. And can you tell me and the trustees what your winter arc, like some of the thoughts that are kind of swirling around in your mind right now as you hear what this season of intentionality means?
Yeah. First of all, I absolutely love this because just throw it back again to the previous episodes. Okay. I love reflection. I feel like reflection and taking inventory of ourselves, our actions, who we're being is it's crucial to living a life that we want to live, right? We can't just go one day at a time forward without also going one day at a time in reflection of what we have done. Right. So it doesn't matter how far in advance you're planning to move forward. We also have to be taking inventory of what has happened up until this point. What decisions have we made? What have been the consequences or reactions of those decisions? Did we like that? Did we not like that? Right. And so I love this concept so much. And I feel like how I'm kind of envisioning it is it feels to me like we're taking the pressure off of the new year by elongating the time in which we allow ourselves to do all of these things that we're expected to do, right? Because I feel like when we think about this same exact concept of what did I like from this year? What do I want to bring into next year? What do I want to start doing that's new? Usually that is happening like, okay, December 31st, we're reflecting. So that way, January 1st, we can start new. Right. And I don't know about you, but reflecting on 365 days in one day to then plan out the next 365 days doesn't really feel like appropriate timing to me. Like it just doesn't even make sense that we could do that and be successful, right? We could do it, but that's when we give up by the 14th, right? Because we gave ourselves one day to reflect, one day to plan, to then expect ourselves to be perfect for the next 365 days. Like that's absolutely insane. I don't know. That doesn't make any sense to me. And so I love this so much. I think that for me personally, some of the things that I have been reflecting on from this year, it kind of goes back into what we were talking about last week about resting. I have really had to learn that not by choice this year. I have embraced it and started to choose it more as it has been put onto me as well. But that's something that I want to continue and learn how to integrate a little bit more seamlessly into my life is learning how to rest and view rest as productive, but also like not need it to be productive, if that makes sense, and just taking care of myself because it is okay for me. We just released an entire episode about this, and that's something that I want to continue to get better at because I know that in my next seasons of life, it's not about how much work I'm doing and how like many tasks I'm completing. It's more about how I'm fulfilling the vision that I want to create and how I'm leading other people to help me fulfill this vision. And I'm only going to be able to do that if I also rest. So I think that that is one of the biggest ones for me. What about you?
I think that one in and of itself, like that one as a whole, is so powerful that like it almost can stand alone. For
Yeah.
your winter arc, like first of all, I love your interpretation of it because I think that's what it is. It's just a concept or a trend, right? That we hear this, quote unquote concept, and then we all make our own adjustments to it and see if it aligns or not. Hence, you can trust yourself podcast. We take what we want and we leave what we don't, right? Like whatever helps us in those ways. And it makes me think a lot of, I'm rereading Untamed again, which for those of you who've read Untamed by Glennon Doyle, it was like the most life changing book I've personally ever read. I love Glennon's work. Like it's just my favorite book. I joke, and it's so beat up the book because it's like been in the bath with me, and it's been to the beach, and it's like it's just like a beat up book, and I call it like my Bible, which is probably like super offensive to some people, but it goes everywhere with me. I love it. It's one of my favorite books. Anyways, and so I'm rereading that, and so as I'm thinking about this winter arc, it's making me think a lot about Glennon's book and the work of living our life by design instead of by default. So when we have something like a winter arc, it's setting that intentional time that we are designing our life and our vision, right? So if we just go into the year just like any other year, it's so easy to just let life unfold in a way that's just quote unquote getting through. So
Mm-hmm.
this is a concept that I didn't expect to bring up, but I think it's very valid here of how many of us know people or may have been these people in the past or are now or whatever it may be, where we all have seasons of it too. I find myself doing it still sometimes where it's like I'm just living for Friday. Once I get through this, once I get this assignment done, once I get this proposal done, once I get through this work week, X, Y, or Z, input anything you want. It's that mentality of once I get through this, or I can't wait for this, or whatever it is. That's the language that I know for myself to when I know I'm living by default.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm just trying to get by or get through, it usually means I'm getting by or getting through not on my own agenda and my own design, but on expectations, which, listen, I don't live in total fairyland. I try to. Everybody kind of pulls me out of fairyland, but if I could live in fairyland all the time, I probably would. But I know that reality is that things need to get done,
Mm-hmm.
right? And taking the intentional time of a concept like this, of the winter arc, to say, this isn't working for me anymore. Or I want to try this. And Maggie and I were talking about this a little bit for a different podcast episode, but we were chatting a little bit. Maggie does adult gymnastics classes. And I hope you're okay with me sharing that, Maggie. I don't think you care.
Of course.
Yeah. It's my favorite thing I've ever heard in my entire life. It's just like, it fills my heart with so much joy of like, I don't know why it's so like revolutionary to me to like think of that, but it's like so inspiring of like, next year, I think I'm looking at like ballet classes now. Like Maggie's inspired me to look at things that aren't necessarily quote unquote common for adults to do, but man, are they freeing, right? So that's a lot of what the winter arc means to me, is just thinking like, what am I looking forward to this next year? I have a lot of big goals and dreams, and they're going to take many years and decades to fully have them all come to fruition, right? That's the point of having a life. And God willing, we'll have a long, long life, right? And the intentionality is everything. And going back to trusting ourselves, it's your own winter arc. Your winter arc is going to look different than mine. My intentions are different than yours. And how that plays out is the beauty of it, of listening to ourselves and getting quiet enough and still enough within ourselves to wonder and then create what we want our life to look like.
Yeah, it's very exciting. Like, it gives me warm fuzzies in my insides to think about that, because and it's not like overwhelming excitement that will burn out. It's kind of like this low burning fire that I know will last, if that makes sense,
Can we talk about that for a second? That
Yeah. Okay, here we
concept.
go.
Maggie, lead us through what that means, because that is the stuff right there.
Okay, so let's go back to what I just said before about how when we give ourselves one day to reflect, then we'll burn out, right? So let's think about this December 31st reflection to then plan out an entire 365 days. So we have one tiny day, 365 combined giant days, right? Like a year in comparison to a day is a really different amount of time. And so if you're going to fuel 365 days in one day, that fire's got to be really big and really hot, right? Really big, really hot. But what happens when we create something that's really big and really hot is that it also usually burns out really fast, right? And I'm not talking about like wildfires that we can't put out, because that's a whole different beast, right? I'm talking about fires that we create within ourselves. The faster and hotter it is, the quicker it's going to end. Okay. And so we think that it's going to, I can do it in one day, and I can create all of this energy right now, and it's going to last over the whole year, right? This is a whole new year idea, but it never works. It never ever happens. And so if we can create a lower temperature but longer duration fire, right? Then that will fuel us for longer, right? It's the same as like, I don't know if you grew up with a wood stove, but I grew up with a wood stove. And if we made the wood stove too hot, it would go out. Like if you make the fire too big in the wood stove, it goes out. And so when you want to start the wood stove for it to last all night, you need to create this fire with foundation, right? It's a fire with foundation. It's not just, you're not just burning the newspaper and the kindling, right? You have to burn like the big log that's going to last for a long period of time. And that's how I feel about this idea of a winter arc in comparison to like a New Year's resolution that we throw together in one day is that we're creating this fire with foundation that's going to burn for a lot longer, because we're creating that fire over a longer period of time. We're taking it more slowly, so then it will burn for longer. And that's how I feel. Like, that's how the excitement feels in my body when I think about this, because I already know and I already have the intention that this is going to last longer. So I know I can go slower. Like, I don't have to rush into it because I know that it's going to last. And that's kind of how I'm viewing it right now. You're shaking your
Speechless.
head.
I have no words, everyone. And that's a wrap on this podcast.
See you next week. No, just kidding.
Wow. It is I've never heard it in that way. You inspire me so much in so many ways, but that really stuck with me of like, I've always wondered and thought, like, I have always been somebody, I was just talking about this last night, of like, I can go in stints. I'm really good in stints, right? Like, I got energy for like a few days and then I can't, I struggle to sustain energy. I struggle to sustain habits. And it's because it's new to me. It's something that I have never fully been able to grasp and maintain. And I think you just gave me the language for it. I've always wondered, when I would sit down the night before New Year's or the week leading up to it, and I'd make my vision board and I'd make my lists and my resolutions and all the things, and then, they'd burn out by January 14th or whatever it was. And it's because I created a bonfire of energy in a short amount of time. And the fire went out. One, because I was like grasping for like way too many things at one time. But two, because I was not focused on, like you said, the slow burn inside of us of, to me, that looks like habits, right? To me, that looks like this freaking wild concept in Meg's life of going one day at a time. That feels so revolutionary to me, to say, oh my gosh, what if I just go one day at a time? And guess what? I have the energy to go one day at a time because it's all I have to do. I'm not thinking 20 days ahead of time. I'm not thinking about, for example, I know I've talked about this slightly, I'm on a weight loss journey, right? And it's a large number that I'm looking to eventually lose. And you can bet that I'm going to do it in a loving way, because I'm not willing, because I've already been there. So at least I've already learned that lesson. It's a huge number. And if I focus on that number, I'm going to burn myself out too fast. But do you know what I can do? I can go one day at a time. I can go meal by meal. I can go moment by moment. I can go workout by workout. And the mental energy that it gives back to me to go one day at a time for most things. I know that some things need to be planned out more and things like that, and we all have the capacity for that, on varying levels. But for most freaking things, to go a day at a time, moment by moment, is, I'm going to use the word revolutionary again, because it really is to me. And if it is for you too, I hope that you come talk to me in DMs so we can be buddies about it. Because it just feels like such a freeing thought. And the analogy you just gave, Maggie, of the fire is incredible. And I'm so happy you were able to share that with us, and grateful that you have words like that that can really leave such a mark on us.
I'm so happy that landed. It kind of just came out. But that's how I picture it. Like, I'm very visual, like the way that I see things. And so I think that, as you're talking about going one day at a time, and you're talking about using that as a tool to hopefully not burn out, what I'm hearing you say is that not only are you focusing on what you need to do right now, like actually physically, right? Okay, I need to record this podcast. I need to film this thing. I have a session. I have to go to the grocery store, whatever, those things, right? We're not leaking mental energy thinking about everything else. That we can't do today anyway, because those things are for tomorrow and it's not tomorrow yet. Like tomorrow I have to bring Bennett to the groomer, but I don't have to bring Bennett to the groomer today. So worrying about bringing Bennett to the groomer tomorrow on today, like, doesn't even make any sense. Right. And so I feel like when we compile all of those things into one day, that's when you kind of get this like overwhelming fire, right? You get this overwhelming fire that then burns out, and then, we don't have the fuel to move on.
And speaking of the puppies, they wanted to chime in right there. The language you're using today is really landing, and I'm sure it's going to land with the trustees too, of that leaking of that energy of it, even though we're not quote unquote doing the thing for the future, the thinking about doing the thing for the future is tiring enough, right? So me thinking, and this is for someone who, again, I tend to run on the more anxious side. That's just how my mind tends to go. I have a real hard time with keeping myself in the present moment, right? And so the mental energy spent just thinking about the future, I think, is half the battle that so many of us feel. It's like we're thinking about all the things we have to do that it just feels too hard to even begin to put one foot in front of the other. And it makes me think of a lot of clients that I have had, and the empathy that we can all have for each other. Of there's so many people who, especially if any of you, I want to speak to you for a second because it's just like coming to my heart, and I feel like there's somebody listening who's going through it right now, of, especially this time of year when the sun goes down. I know this can be a really challenging year for a lot of people with depression, seasonal depression, whatever it may be for you. It can feel really overwhelming to get. It's almost like we lose ourselves in those seasons, and we're like, I miss me. How do I get back to me? At least I felt like that. And that is such a feeling. Like when you miss yourself, that's when you're like, gosh, like those are some of the most painful moments of life. And so if any of you are going through that right now, it is so tempting to feel like we have to do this big overhaul of ourselves and this big, massive, renovation almost of ourselves to get ourselves, because that's what we want to do. We want to get back to ourselves, right? So we think of all the things that our quote unquote selves used to do when we were feeling better. And the truth is that just thinking about that can be so overwhelming, and it can keep us in these dark, sad spaces longer. And the reason I'm talking so freshly about this is because I've really been in that place lately. It's, no one is immune from this. I don't care if you're a therapist in training or podcast hosts who come on here and talk a lot of positivity. Like, none of us are immune from going through emotions and going through hard times. So it's again, it can feel so simple to just put one foot in front of the other and do one thing, but it can be the absolute thing that we need, because for those of us who struggle with, moments of anxiety, depression, whatever it may be, again, nod to Glennon's book Untamed. She talks a lot about it, of living too high or too low. Like for those of us who can kind of be in that state, doing the big overhaul can be the really damaging part for us. And so what you're saying, Maggie, of the slow burn, it's really hitting home. And we had a whole, interestingly enough, we had kind of a whole other episode planned. We kind of just planned to like talk about the winter arc slightly and then go into our other topic. But I don't know, Maggie, in real time, I'm kind of thinking like this topic took us into a different place, and I kind of just want to stay here. We were going to talk a little bit about like holiday expectations and things like that. And if you still want to, we can do like a back and forth, you and I, talking about that. But I feel like this episode was really needed today for myself, and I believe for some of the listeners too. And that feels good, of knowing that that's why I'm getting a little existential now and like bigger world thinking, which I can't help myself. That's who I am. This is what helps each other. Us sharing is what helps one another. Us connecting and knowing that we're not alone, and we're not alone in these experiences in life, is what helps us move through it, right? So people writing the books and having the podcast and talking with each other in everyday life and conversation helps us so much. It helps us to feel less lonely. And what do all of us humans want? We don't want to feel alone. We're not meant to be alone. We're meant to be in connection with one another. So thanks for letting me go a little existential for a second. I just felt like I needed to say that. And I'm sending love to all of you every time we record, but especially today, and especially for any of you who may be in that season right now. I'm really sending lots of love.
Yeah, I think that this is a really important conversation too, especially because, like you said, it's so real for us right now, which means that if it's real for me and it's real for you, then it's probably real for more people. So we may as well just talk about it, right? Like
Yeah.
there's no need to hide it. But I did want to ask you. So you mentioned like the next topic that we were going to talk about, and I think it would be valuable to, sorry if you can hear my dogs in the background. The FedEx van just brought their dog food and they really want to let him know that they're excited about it. But I wanted to ask you, so to like kind of tie the two together, right? The next topic we wanted to talk about today was like holiday expectations and how to maybe change what we usually do, right? And I feel like this actually does tie in well to the conversation that we're having, because the inspiration for this was the idea that sometimes it can feel challenging to ask people like your family members, right, to make changes to what you usually do around the holidays, right? And the reality is, we're talking about this. We're talking about going one day at a time. We're talking about how sometimes we can plan ahead, sometimes we can't. And sometimes traditions are what holds us together in a time like this, right? Because we don't have to think so much about what we're going to do. And sometimes things that are like quote unquote expected during the holidays can add a tremendous amount of pressure that we don't have the capacity to hold, right? So it's a balancing act between, is this tradition slash expectation something that is relieving pressure from me because I don't have to think, right? I know what's going to happen. Or is it creating more pressure for me because I don't have the capacity to do that much right now, right? And so I wanted to ask you kind of where you're at this year in terms of, normal holiday activities, which is probably not normal since you are newly married, which means you have now created your own family.
Yeah.
And how you're kind of just navigating that and navigating those changes.
Mm-hmm. I love this question, Maggie, and I was about to answer in a very Maggie form where you will say the phrase like so much yes. That's how I felt when you were talking. So much yes. So
Do I
much
say
yes
that?
to that. I don't know. I feel like you do. Do you say that?
I don't know, and I'll have to listen.
Listeners, please let us know. Does Maggie say? I feel like I've heard you say so much yes before.
I
Anyways,
probably have.
I really like it. So much yes to that. We always say the word seasons. There's seasons for everything in life, which is so freaking nice to think about. Like there's a season for everything. See, me saying that there's a season for everything makes me feel like the pressure comes down some, right? Because every year is going to be different. Every day is different in some ways, and we have to give ourselves space to allow that to change. So last year, for example, I was very holiday spirit, ready to go, had lots of energy. I was just in a place where I wasn't feeling like I am this year, right? And so I was the queen. And in some ways, for me, and I don't know if I'm necessarily proud of this or not proud of this, there's a performative element for me to the holidays. And maybe that's something for me. Yeah, that's something for me to explore, in the future of how to make it feel. It's not that it's disingenuine because it's all real. Like but it's the theater person in me, maybe, right? Like be doing things like that and having all the gifts and the cards and the perfect wrapping paper. That was my thing last year. And it was wonderful. And it was beautiful. And this year, it's not it, and just not there right now. I said to Maggie on the phone before we got on here to record, I saw a bunch of books on her island, and she was saying like they're doing a white elephant and she's going to give one of her favorite books. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this year I want to I'm in a much more vulnerable state and a much more intimate state where I'm wanting to like give somebody a book because I know they might be going through it. And that's me. We often want to give what we need, right? So
Yes.
right now I'm needing that. I need the closeness, the vulnerability, the human connection. I'm missing that right now, right? I'm craving it. So if somebody gave me a book that they like highlighted and underlined and all the things, like that's what's going to speak to my heart this year more than a Nespresso machine, right? Or something
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that,
yeah.
which love the Nespresso machine. If anybody wants to send one, I will take it. But we don't need, Maggie's like shaking her head. She's the queen of gifts, by the way. If you all didn't know this, Maggie loves a gift. And you could speak for yourself, Maggie, but we love gifts. So yes, don't keep the gifts coming. Not that anybody was sending us one, but brands, when you listen, start sending them. But that's where I am this year. So there is a more wholesome feeling that I'm feeling right now than the more, I hate to use this word, but like there is the capitalistic Christmas.
Yeah.
And there is. It's
It's
just a
reality.
reality. It
Yeah.
is reality. And I buy into it sometimes. I love it. I love all the things, right? But this year I'm in a very I'm changing expectations. So last year, I'm going to give you practical things now. We are in a state right now where we are saving money. We are trying to pay off so much debt right now that, full transparency wise, we don't have the extra income to go all out on gifts like we did last year. Last year we had more ability to do that, and we did, and it was fine and great. And this year we're going to send a loving card and maybe some baked goods, and that's going to be it. Whereas last year there were hundreds of dollars going out towards Christmas. And if I didn't have a podcast called You Can Trust Yourself, and I trust myself very well, if I didn't trust myself, I would overthink that. I would be like, I can't do that. I can't spend hundreds of dollars, last year and send some cookies this year. I can't do that to people. But I trust myself, and I know that I'm not in that season right now. So what people tend to do sometimes, and I can say this because I used to be the one who would do it, is we tend to want to overcompensate, throw it on a credit card, throw it here, throw it there. And if we can actually just lean in and trust ourselves to know and have the conversations with people that this season's a little different for me, and this is what I'm needing this season, and I hope that you can understand that this is where I'm at. Sometimes we just avoid those conversations if a conversation needs to be had, like between family members to exchange or whatever. But that's how I'm navigating it this year, and it feels really good. What about you?
Yeah, I think that those fluctuations are more normal than we would like to admit, right? Like, I definitely have fallen victim to that mindset too of, well, I did this before, so I have to do it again, even if I can't, right? And I just, I think that if we could all collectively work on that, that would be great. But anyway, for me, our Christmas holidays have looked fairly similar over the last couple of years. So since Cause and I have gotten married, we will be married 5 years in January, which feels like a whole lifetime. Obviously, I know that it's not, but it feels like it is. Over the last 5 years, I would say that our Christmases have been pretty consistent. Like, we would spend some time with my family on Christmas Day. We would go to his parents' house, and everything was pretty consistent. This year, it is going to look a little bit different because my family moved away. And so I'm not going to get to see them on Christmas, which is sad. And so my sister and I have had conversations around, like, okay, how are we going to exchange gifts? Like, what are the rules here, right? Like, what are the rules? How are we going to do this? And we called it a logistics meeting, like a Christmas logistics meeting. And her and I like got on FaceTime and we talked about it, and we just like hashed out all the details, because that relieves the pressure of feeling like I need to meet someone else's expectations that I don't know, right? Or I'm expecting them to meet my expectations that they don't know. And those things aren't fair, right? That's not fair to people that you care about to not be clear with them. In my opinion, I don't think that that's fair. And so I think that it is fair for everyone to be where they're at. And I think that it's important that if you have like traditions or things that you usually do with people, you communicate with them about where you're at, because otherwise it can leave people feeling upset, right? Especially, for me, this is honestly something that I do to protect my own self mostly because, like you were saying, I do love gifts so much. And when like you get me a gift that I know you put thought into, does not matter the price tag on it, I'm so excited because I'm like, oh my God, you thought of me. Like that's what it says to me is you were thinking about me when you saw this thing and now you're giving it to me, right? And so I having those conversations and like setting those expectations helps me protect myself from disappointment about expectations that I created and didn't communicate to other people, right? So it's not about them, it's about me setting expectations or like creating these whole ideas that then didn't happen because they only happened in my own head, right? And so bringing those conversations to real life helps. And so for us in like with my sister, my mom, my side of the family for Christmas, we have like very practical conversations around like how many gifts are we getting? What are the budgets? Like all of that type of stuff, because that's just how we do it. Right. With Cause's side of the family, it's not that clear, but that's okay because that's how we do it. Right. It's not as like big into it being quote unquote like fair. And that's not how I feel about it on my side, but it kind of looks that way. Right. And we just have these different sets of expectations on both sides of the family that then we know kind of what's going to happen and we can prepare ourselves for that. And I feel like it really helps most with us being able to enjoy the holiday because we're not worried about what other people are doing, what they're thinking about us, what we're thinking about them. It kind of like puts all of that to the side so then we can be present and enjoy the holiday and not feel that stress that I personally feel like is unnecessary and I don't want to be experiencing at that time. And so I think that as it changes, it's important to just have those conversations and like you're saying, be honest with them and say like, hey, this is where I'm at right now. And I just want to let you know that because I want to be able to enjoy this holiday together or, however that looks. So that's kind of where I'm at.
So much yes.
So much yes.
Again. So much yes.
So much
Sometimes
yes.
it's gosh, Maggie, what did we discover today? Communication and taking it one day at a time. God, I mean,
Yeah, girl.
these freaking concepts that have been around since forever. It can cut down so much pressure on our everyday lives and our holiday expectations because we know the holidays are full of expectations on ourselves, on others, collective, family systems, you name it, it's there in a lot of ways. And so thank you for sharing all of that and some of the tangible ways that you may go about having the conversation, like letting us into how you and your sister communicate and the actual practicalities of it, right? And yes, I hope that helped you listening who may be feeling it in many ways right now, that this is one area that can be simplified and the pressure can be reduced by either A, a conversation, and B, even if there's no conversation that takes place, the trust within yourself of this is where I am. This is where I'm at right now. And if you're in a season where what I was explaining before of the vulnerability of really, going through it and feeling it right now, like feeling some heaviness, all of those things, like, I'm sorry, last year I was obsessed with wrapping paper. Obsessed. I
That's
ordered
me
so
this
many.
year.
Oh my gosh, I ordered so many different rolls on Amazon. I was obsessed with the thickness. I wanted the perfect bow. That's what I was doing. This year, the last thing on my freaking mind while trying to keep my head above water is some wrapping paper. Okay? So it's so funny how every year can change and we gotta let it change. It doesn't mean anything about me. I'll be picking out wrapping paper again. And then
Yes,
I'll be
you
not caring
will.
about it again. And
Yes, you
both are
will.
okay. There's room for it all, right? And who knows, last minute I may be get up in there again with the wrap paper. But let it change. Let it evolve. Trust yourself this season and all the seasons. Maggie, anything else you want to say before we wrap up this week with
No,
our listeners?
I don't. I just want to say that's it. That's the real update. Okay. These are the real updates in real
Real
time.
chat, real
And
talk.
like you said earlier, I hope that this helps you feel a little bit more normal if you're going through these things too. And that's it. Next week is our last episode of the season. Can you believe it?
No, I'm like sad and happy and sad and happy. and all the things at the same time. And then we come out with you know what I am excited about? Season fucking 4. I can't even say freaking because it's so, we're going to come back with season 4 soon after the new year. We don't know the exact date yet, but like season
Wild.
4. And
Yeah.
oh, it just feels good. I'm getting the warm and fuzzies over season 4.
Heck yeah.
I mean, season 3, let's like enjoy the holidays and soak it in and all be here together in our little cozy trust pod of a community. But get ready, trust pod. We are coming at you with season 4 here soon. So
some up levels are going to happen.
Yes. Rest, recover, lots of trust and love from us to you. We love you. Catch us back here next week with our holiday episode.
Yes. See you there. Bye, everyone. Thank you for joining us on another episode of You Can Trust Yourself with Meg and Maggie. Our mission is to leave you with encouragement and tools to nurture your ability to trust yourself. If you found this episode valuable, don't forget to subscribe and please share it with a friend. Then take a moment to leave us a 5-star rating and review. Your support helps our show grow, and for that, we are extremely grateful. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch the episodes. Till next week, lots of trust and love, Meg and Maggie.